Alright, what is up folks? So I'm going to talk about something that's extremely important, right? I'm going to come back to the topic of leftover women. So many numbers have been thrown around. Some people say that there's 100 million leftover women in China. It's no way to come up with the exact number, but I would definitely say that the number is very, very high. There are a lot of things to consider, right? And so I want to talk about this issue because obviously this affects both sides of the spectrum. It's not just a man's issue, it's also a woman's issue, right? Obviously this is an issue with a lot of men who are not able to find a date. You know, they can't find someone to enter a stable long-term relationship or get married or have children. On the other hand, you have to consider this. Let's look at an example. Let's say because this is a crisis worldwide. For example, let's look at a country, let's say Japan, right? Japan has roughly 123 million people and the population is still dropping. So the Philippines, I believe, it's on the verge of surpassing Japan. So if you look at Japan's birth rate, it's roughly 1.2 children per woman. And if you look at the birth rate in Philippines, it's roughly 2.4, both Asian countries, right? So the population in the Philippines is still increasing, while in Japan, right, I believe that in 2024, so Japan's estimated to have lost something like 863,000 people. So yeah, probably at this pace, they'll be looking at, you know, a decline of 1 million, then 1.2 million, then 1.4 million, and things are going to get worse and worse in the country of Japan. And China is probably, I would say, 10 to 15 years behind Japan. So, you know, even though these are both Asian countries, you know, why are some Asian countries seeing basically a demographic suicide, while in other countries the population is still increasing, like in the Philippines? Well, you have to consider what's happening in China right now. So the most recent estimate, I believe, is something like you know, out of the 40 million university students that's currently enrolled in over 3,000 universities in China, I believe the most recent figure they have is something like 54% of the student body is made of females. So in America it's 60%. Very interesting, right? Why so many American students they want to cancel the student loans? It's because 60% of students currently enrolled in colleges and universities are women, and 66% of all student loans are owned by women. So as you guys can see, we're basically, this is the red heels effect. We have the fall of man, where man they can't no longer compete with women. There's a lot of contributing factors to this, and a lot of it is basically a discrimination based on gender, because it's the same thing in many Chinese workplaces and also in Chinese schools, where some programs they basically have a mandatory quota, so they require a minimum of this, let's say 50 or 40% women. However, right, when the demographic shifts the other way around, if let's say 1 year out of all the applicants, let's say if 60% are women, and or even 70 or 80% are women, and they don't actually try to balance out the numbers by, you know, making the numbers 50-50 to make sure that there are enough men enrolling in these programs. So this means that you know, there are more women who are graduating in universities. There are a record number of women that's entering the STEM field, and a record number of women becoming doctors, becoming lawyers, becoming engineers. And this is a massive problem, because as you guys can see, when a woman's income level, when that increases, right, once a woman reaches a certain socio and economic status, right, her dating pool continues to shrink. Well, a woman who is successful, who is making $100,000, $150,000 a year, she will never ever look at a guy who is making, let's say, $75,000 a year. So this is you know, basically direct opposite to how a man thinks. As a man's income increases, his dating pool continues to expand, but however, as a woman's income increases, her dating pool continues to shrink. So this is the crisis that China is dealing with, right? A man who is making $1 million a year can virtually date 99% of women out there. However, a woman that's making $1 million a year, well, she's going to die alone. So what happens is that back then, you know, 50, 60, 70 years ago, when almost all the people who are graduating from these post-secondary institutions, who are becoming doctors, who are becoming lawyers, who are becoming engineers, they were all men. So all these men who are at these you know, high-paying white-collar jobs, they can all find a wife and they can all start a family. But see, here's the thing, right? When a man makes a lot of money, he can say that I can finally find a wife, I can finally have a children, I can finally start a family, I can finally continue my bloodline. However, when a woman makes a lot of money, instead of, you know, trying to find a husband or have children or start a family, she will say that, I'm finally independent from man. So many of these leftover women, yes, you know, some of Westerners say that, how come, you know, some of these leftover women, you know, they're very, very attractive, they seem to be very feminine, how come you know, they end up being leftover women? You know, how come they're making so much money, but they're 30, 35, 40, and they end up single and childless and not getting married? Well, here's the thing, right? A lot of these women who, let's say, they have gone to university, they have gotten their masters, they have gotten their PhD, they have basically decided that, you know what, just marriage, having children is not worth it. This is very, very different to how a man thinks. Look at Elon Musk, right? The richest man in the world. He's got, what, I believe 12 children with maybe 8 different women. But however, look at what happens when the woman makes a lot of money, right? Look at Oprah Winfrey, right? She's going to end up dying alone. Look at Jennifer Aniston. Unfortunately, she's going to end up dying alone. Look at Kamala Harris. She's going to end up dying alone. Well, I understand Kamala Harris is married, but you know what? She does not have any children. So, that's, I think, one issue. A lot of people are not looking at this side of the issue. Yeah, well, if you're a Westerner, you're thinking it from the Western perspective, you might think that, oh, maybe are these Chinese women acting like crazy bitches from hell, like the crazy woman you see from the West, like the Catch Me Outside girl, right? Perhaps a small percentage of Chinese women are acting like that. Those are the Chinese Karens. Yeah, there's a term, by the way, it's called 母夜叉. So 母夜叉, that's basically, a Chinese woman who acts like an insane, crazy bitch. So you can say that's the term for a Chinese Karen. But that's a small percentage of women. But yeah, I think the biggest issue in China is, yeah, you can call it the red heels effect, where in so many instances, women are outperforming men, whether it's in schools, whether it's in the work field, whether, it's favoritism, whether it's government policies. They're more likely to get hired, they're more likely to get promoted, they're more likely to get scholarships at school, and they're more likely to get accepted into top-tier universities. So the jobs that used to belong to men, they just simply don't exist anymore. They simply belong to women. And yeah, a lot of cases I do see is that these women, in many of these cases, they simply choose to stay single. Like for example, let's say if you live in a mega city, if you lived in Beijing or if you lived in Shanghai, what do you think is a good wage? I would say a good monthly salary in the mega cities in China is probably 20,000 yuan a month. So that's what, 240,000 yuan a year, which roughly translates to $30,000 a year US. I know that sounds extremely low. Obviously, if you live in New York City on that kind of salary, you'll be living on the streets. But you have to remember, right, purchasing power parity. So things are a lot cheaper in China. The rent, everything, right, the groceries, your car payment, everything, compared to the West, is a lot cheaper. Obviously, you're making less. So $33,000 US, if you live in Beijing or Shanghai, you can live an amazing life, and on a single income you can support yourself no problem at all. And yes, once a woman reaches this level of income, right, she'll just simply say that maybe I'll just get a dog, maybe I'll just get a cat, maybe I'll get some guinea pigs, maybe I'll just get myself a fish tank, perhaps some turtles, and yeah, I will simply not get married and not raise children, and I will simply die alone with my pets. And some women are happy doing that. So yes, it is a major crisis, and there's almost no way to reverse it. This is why in countries like in China, South Korea, in Japan, right, where you see extremely high literacy rates, especially amongst the women, that's why you're seeing this basically demographic suicide, because many successful women, they simply say that, oh, now I'm financially independent from men, I don't need to find a man to spend this money, I would rather just make money on my own, and I will die off alone, right? Great example, look at India, right? So India's even though their birth rate is dropping, but their population is still increasing. I believe India's population is expected to peak at around 1.7 billion. If you look at the literacy rate of an average Indian woman, I believe it's only anywhere between 60 to 70%, right? That's why you see a much higher birth rate in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, because many of the women there are uneducated. Same thing in Africa, right? Look at Nigeria, right? The average fertility rate in Nigeria is 5.1 children per woman, because most women don't have a chance at education. And when you provide women with education, like what you see in China, in Singapore, in Taiwan, in South Korea, in Japan, you will have a demographic collapse and a population suicide. It's no easy solution to the problem. There's a lot of factors to consider, so I will keep coming back to this topic. So thank you guys so much for watching this video, for staying till the end. I'll see you guys next video.